Hey everybody, Dave Whitmarsh, CEO of Whitmarsh Consulting Group. Today we are talking with Yuri, and to tell you the truth, this is about as blind as it gets. I've chatted with him a couple times, but I don't have a 20-year history or anything, so I'm looking forward to learning more and sharing this with everybody. So Yuri, tell us a bit about you and who you work for and what you do, and let's start this conversation.
Great. First of all, Dave, thank you very much for having me on. It's always great to speak with you. Just a brief bio. Essentially, I run a company called HR Talent and Systems, and the goal, it's a consulting firm. I go into fast growth startups and other companies. Let's say Inc. 5000 is a reference point. So they're growing quickly, something's working really well, but they're just kind of starting to wrap their mind around, well, what's our people strategy? How do we do HR in a serious strategic way? Oh, our talent pipeline is drying up because our funding round was a while back. So unfortunately, HR is usually something people think about not between 1 and 10 as a priority subject, but somewhere after. Usually it's an emergency, something's really not working. They can't keep their best people and they can bring on new ones. So that's when I get a call and, okay, what do you do? What's your magic? And, I lay out a plan. Here's what we would do for 12 months. And the first is you have to improve communication. That's usually 80% of the problems, right? So people either don't share information, they don't understand why they're here, they don't know how to move forward in their career, not getting much in terms of learning and development. Their project management is pretty meager, if anything exists. They don't have a sense of how they're doing, just their performance. Managers are usually pretty clueless about how to actually manage, never mind how to lead. And leaders are used to this kind of command and control premise where they'll do dribs and drabs here and there, but they're not really sharing how the company is doing. They're not sharing any big vision, never mind values. Maybe something is above the door. We value our people, or, get back in the office so we can see you here, and then you're sitting in your cubicle again, right? So they bring me on to kind of, let's say, okay, well, we know that we're in trouble. We don't really know why things aren't working or why people are leaving. So help us diagnose that and help us turn it around, build systems around it. I also do coaching. That's the part that I enjoy the most. That's essentially sitting down with people and, through a particular framework that I've developed over the years, just getting them to talk, getting them to understand their story, helping them to figure out, okay, where I am now, how does that fit into my trajectory? How does that help me to build my career and grow my skills and all that good stuff, right? And just make progress. And from there, once you have people talking, you have them sharing information, then from a business perspective, you start seeing where that kind of sharing of information in a faster loop can really help people understand, again, why they're here, who has a certain way of doing things, certain way of learning things, certain needs. You can start moving the needle much faster. When you close that loop, you really start making fast progress, both from the top down and from the bottom up. And that's a big part of what I do.
Yeah, so you can imagine if you're, if you effectively are fast growing and you have a startup and you haven't bothered to put any of that structure in, you can just imagine as you start to grow how disfragmented all of those communications would be, and how to get that information you need, or even how to know where you stand within the organization. So without that structure, it has to be a real challenge for sure. And so you could imagine putting that structure in many companies, properly for the first time. They must just go crazy with thanks and praise, because the communications and the method to get things done is set up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty polar. People either really love what I do because I open things up, I share information, they're finally, oh, that's what's going on there. or they really don't like what I do because it takes away their monopoly over that information, and makes their makes their silo no longer a silo. So it's a very polar response. Some people really like it. Others say, you know what, you're trying to take away my command and control situation. I don't like it. I don't like you. That's the nature.
And in your particular case, then having that coaching background, if people just don't like change, right? Or some people don't like change, which is maybe not so bad in a Fortune 500 financial industry type of company, but when you're in a smaller company or a startup company, like it's all about change, right? So being able to coach some people through and identify some of those things would be a real asset at that time. Have you? And so, how long have you been doing that aspect of work?
So I started out, a lot of my career has been kind of in backwards order, meaning I start either creating a company in a space, then I really go deeper into it, which is, I don't know if I would recommend that route, but that's just how it's worked out for me. In this case, I started out as an executive coach after careers in academic neuroscience, law, finance, tech, and then kind of deciding, you know what, forget all that. I like the coaching thing. I'm pretty good at it. I can get people results pretty quickly. So let me just do that. And after coaching hundreds and hundreds of people, kind of starting to see patterns and themes. Okay, so if, let's say, mid-career millennials who are kind of rising through the middle ranks, getting toward the top, they're encountering certain problems about, let's say, managing people or circulating information about politics, growing their career, and they often get stuck. And a lot of the being stuck is not necessarily because they can't communicate or something about emotional intelligence. It's just they forgot who they are. They forgot their story and why it matters. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I sent a weekly newsletter, and I myself was reading a book called Story 10X. Excellent book. Basically, the goal is to say, okay, what's my story? I mean, each particular kind of subject, but also what's my narrative as a business and as a human, right? So if you want to, the image is like this. If a story is a pearl, then a narrative is kind of this pearl necklace. So I myself realized that in my business, I don't share enough about my own life. Who am I? What is my family? Maybe my hobbies, whatever. I've tried to do that, but maybe it's been piecemeal. So I decided, you know what? Let me reintroduce myself to my readers. So I wrote my why. What is my why? Right. And the feedback has been pretty amazing. It's like, how do you have the balls to write that up? I wish I did. I'm like, you know what? I've been doing this a while. That's where I mined my best stuff. I went back in my story and I said, look, I've failed a lot. On paper, it looks, maybe not the best, but I've managed to reinvent myself and retell a different story to make sense of, okay, who am I? How did I get here? And where am I going? So then I can think about how to get there. Okay, so I've had to do that over and over and over because, again, going into a new industry 5 different times without any experience, without any connection. So I don't have this reserve of knowledge or understanding. I kind of just have to figure it out as I'm swimming. And, a lot of people, yeah, you're right. They're afraid of change. And they're kind of like, they know that there's misalignment. They know that something doesn't feel right or they're not making progress. I think at root, all of us really just need to feel that we're making some kind of progress. And when we're not making that progress, in some particular area of life, that becomes a stumbling block. So coaching really helps to just get the story out, understand that, yeah, the story is not unique, but there is a particular reason why each person is here on earth, brought in at a certain point, within a certain family at a certain time, and with particular capabilities in order to help others. So now that a person, let's say, goes through that framework that I work through with every single client, regardless of career coaching, business coaching, they know their story, they remember who they are, they remember what they went through and why that matters for business or for their career. Suddenly they say, you know what, okay, yeah, I want to go do something that's more well aligned with who I am and what I need from life. right? So I can make a greater impact. I can find clarity about who I am. I can find meaning. And yeah, of course, success. Success comes from those other three. So using that, I can coach somebody on, let's say, getting promoted faster, getting paid more, doing something, within the company, hopefully, right? If I'm working for the leadership, I want to help keep them in the company, but, realign them so they bring their best energy and they do their best work here. Else. And that is, I would say, what makes the biggest difference. It's not about being in-house. It's not about face-to-face. It's really about taking time to listen and understand the person's story and then helping to connect that to their work. And, you can rejigger sort of what their exact role is and what their tasks are based on that. And then you're off and running and you suddenly see a different person, even their posture, the way they speak, it's a totally different situation. And that's why coaching is so powerful, even within the framework of HR consulting.
Yeah, it really is amazing. It really is amazing how people like to know their responsibilities and they like to know where they fit. And there's comfort and there's expectations. And when you have those types of things in place, it really maps, it really helps them with their setting up where they want to be and creates a stable environment for them. And without some of that framework, you could just burn through talent, like your retention, it would just flip like crazy, and you can lose some real superstars in that mix just because they need that framework, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at the current situation, right? I just was reading this yesterday, right? The most engaged talent, it's not really going anywhere because it's engaged, right? And it's the great resignation is really for, Festivus for the rest of us, if you will, right? So it's everybody who already was not well aligned, already sitting and doing something they hate and can't connect themselves to. So of course they want to leave because now, in addition to that lack of alignment, they're also pulled back into the office. And it's like, I don't need this stuff. I can work remotely for somebody. I mean, hell, anybody else, right? Without that pressure, and I can find something that fits me better.
Yeah, totally. And so how do you, if you catch a small company, how do you deal with the technology? Because at some point you really need to bring in some technology, right? Or platforms, depending on what you want to call them. And do you have partnerships or anything of your own, or do you just work with what people bring to are interested in pursuing? Or is that even a part of your service, or do you just?
It is. HR talent and systems, right? There's a reason why the systems comes last, but it does show up. You're absolutely right. When you're doing digital transformation, we know that 80% of them fail, and the number one reason that so many of them fail is because there's no overriding vision, there's no communication, there's no connection to how does this help me in my career? How does this help me to reskill, upskill, get promoted, get paid more? It's not rocket science. You have to look at each person's self-interest. But if you don't ask what the person wants, you have no clue. So, I do essentially four things. I do design, meaning I come in and say, look, here's an assessment of what's working in your organization, also what's not working, right? So usually it's kind of this scattered, certain systems, but other things are run manually or in spreadsheets. And, you have to have this kind of big picture. Okay, if I'm an architect and I'm going to create interlocking systems, they have APIs, there's some data generated, that data goes to some kind of dashboard, we have analytics running, and we can make decisions based on that. Right? If we are to arrive at that point, then yeah, we need to understand what systems are going to work for this particular company based on scale, industry, certain security standards, for example, or HIPAA compliance. That's a whole other issue, right? So because you have to think about costs as well, because you can't just sort of come in and say, hey, let's build this utopia. Right. Who's going to pay for this utopia, right? So there's always that limitation for, okay, we want to build this, but we only have this budget. And that's something you have to think about. So, okay, I design that, I create a strategy, Then I do coaching. I communicate my strategy and connect that strategy to everyone who's going to benefit from this in very concrete ways. If you adopt these 5 systems, it's going to make your everyday work easier. It's going to prevent you having to share the same message 5 times because there's a nudging mechanism, right? You can go search Slack instead of looking email because email is only a small subset of all your communication, right? Let's say your performance management can feed in there. You can have employee engagement surveys filtering in there. You can have newsletters. You can have all kinds of different ways to circulate information. And, you have to have champions from the top and you have to have champions in middle management in order to really get adoption. But everything goes back to there's an inflection point before which there's a lot of resistance. And the resistance is because, look, I'm already busy. Why do I need more of this crap? Like, how does this help? So you pull the story out and you say, look, if you want to accelerate your growth, you got to do this, okay? We're going to put this in your performance management plan. We're going to make sure that if you master this, you're going to get rewarded for it. Light bulb goes off. Okay, I get it. All right, let's do this, right? Let me implement this on my team. Let's measure this. Let's run with it. Suddenly the resistance goes down. And finally, the piece that you asked about, you have to go in and actually understand how to implement the system and actually do it. So in addition to all of the kind of bigger picture things and kind of getting it down into practice, I have to go and I have to deal with the vendors. Let's say it might be Culture Amp or Slack or half a dozen other things and make them all talk to each other. So that, we have some kind of readout, we have a dashboard, we have analytics, we have regular leadership meetings where we share those things and we discuss, okay, what does this tell us? And then how can we improve that? But at least we have a starting point. A lot of issues stem from the fact that there's no baseline, there's no standard upon which you can measure your company if you've never done it before. So you have to implement that floor. Then, we have systems, we have dashboards. Let's compare, where we are compared to 6 months ago. Once we have that, so that's systems are a huge deal, but they're not enough on their own if there's no big picture understanding, no architecture, and no helping people to see why it matters for them.
Yeah. So having I get, it's funny because a lot of especially the smaller organizations or people sell smaller systems are, their philosophy is, it's super easy, we can have you up and running, in no time. But without that strategy and the architect and the framework that really sits, between the people and the technology, you're probably not going to get a very high success rate in implementation. Or we're not talking payroll, right? That's is an HR system that's kind of been mastered. Pretty quick if somebody doesn't get paid, and that usually fixed pretty fast, right? But when it comes to strategy and the growth, that's a whole different game. That truthfully, even in my experience, in HR, the 14,000 vendors that I communicate with on a regular basis, they're not even HR minded from a company. A lot of time it's been a technology guy who's built a better mousetrap, and they don't understand the structure that needs to be put in an HR, and they're in the space, right? So you can just imagine what the real world would be like out there. So that's awesome. And so what do you see out in the market that troubles most people, or most people need help with?
I would say like this. I hate to frame it in these terms, but this is this is the truth, right? Unfortunately, people really start thinking about HR once they have an Achilles heel in terms of their talent pipeline. Before then, it's like, well, we have smart people, let them figure it out. No, you can't figure it out if you don't understand much about how people actually work. People are not systems. I like the joke that SaaS for a lot of companies is software as a savior. It doesn't work. You need some kind of, emotional intelligence sounds nice, but how do things work in practice? How do organizations work, right? What are the dynamics? You have to have some kind of idea from a totally different perspective. And, unfortunately, if you're in HR as a consultant or full-time, you have to battle this kind of perception of HR as that guy in the office, right? It's like, what is he really doing here? It's just, making life a giant pain, pushing some papers, running some payroll, right? So you have to overcome that kind of resistance, not just resistance to change, but to HR as well. It's a black hole, it's a cost center. No longer can you think that way because, but once you get around to it, okay, we're bleeding people. Keep my people here. No problem. But if you want to keep people here, you need better systems. You need coaching. You need people to see what their career pathways are, tell them how they're actually doing. Then maybe you can have a conversation about, let's improve productivity, let's improve communication. But if you've lost people already, then that's it, right? I mean, they will go because they have other choices. So that's really what I see out in the market, that people are very, very slowly starting to have greater awareness of HR as not just a cost center, not just a black hole. It's a leader at the C-suite level. You have to pay attention.
Yeah, and so, I always figured that without economical instances that are prevalent right now, with retention being a huge issue, I always figured that compliance probably drives the first HR hire, right? It's like, oh darn, we're doing some things now, and if we don't nail those right, we're in trouble, right? So, but it's a total common theme right now. Everybody that I've spoken to, that's what they're keeping the right talent, right? So, all right, so, and I want to get on that newsletter of yours, and I'm sure there might be some other folks. So we'll make sure that we'll have a link. If you're reading or seeing this, there'll be a link somewhere in the description to the webcast, to Yuri's website, and I encourage you guys to have a conversation. I can't imagine. If as a small business owner myself, I can't imagine not having the right structure, especially if I was, in a fast growth or losing some key people. So, spend the time and have a conversation. Yuri might be a good fit for you in that instance. And so, is there anything else that you'd like to sort of part on?
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that one other thing I found in terms of just big picture around HR, learning and development, right? That's often a sore subject because there's never any time for it. It's usually, let's throw some money, see what happens there, right? But the problem with learning and development when you hit something like a pandemic is that you suddenly uncover a lot of really dark places, right? People have mental health issues, people have, lack of, let's say, childcare, they have financial issues. There's a whole host of other things wherein people don't get the benefit of learning life skills before they're thrown into adult life. And often they either never learn them quite well, and all of this impacts work. That's kind of like, you can't just sort of be, smiling on camera and you're suffering in the background. That doesn't work anymore. Because that shows up in your work, right? Because you're working from home, kids are jumping around you, as you saw my daughter was jumping behind in the frame, right? Yep. But very, very serious things come out. So you can't really afford to just throw money at the question, hope that a vendor solves a problem. You need an overriding life philosophy. And that's something that I haven't seen out in the market. There's a million self-help books, something addresses the morning routine, something about finances, career, negotiation, but it's all in a vacuum. So I kind of looked left and right. I said, you know what? I have to create it myself. I have to do it for my kids. I have to do it for my employees when I'm head of HR. I can't just ignore that and hope that it goes away. It never will. So that's why I wrote a book which is essentially this kind of holistic learning and development platform. And it's a whopper of 850 pages, but that's on purpose. It's kind of like a coffee table book. It's 4 conversations I think all of us must have every single day, not just once a year, during the high holidays of our religion. So it's first is health, right? Our conversation with our body. So it's fitness, nutrition, breathing, biorhythms, things like that, right? Just make sure you have the baseline so you can function well, so you can enter a higher cognitive state to do your life's best work. Okay. Number 2 is in our mind. So what are our mental models and life skills? It looks at cognitive biases and how to battle them. That's a whole nest. The biggest chapter in the book is around that. And other things, how do you manage your career, your business, your finances, but also how do you manage expectations? I think it's one of the most underrated skills that most people don't really know how to do it for themselves in their head, for others of themselves, and of themselves toward others. And then how do you make decisions well, right? Nobody teaches this stuff unless you're maybe in, working for the FBI or the police, right? Nobody teaches you this stuff. And then the third level is your conversation with other people. So that's, negotiation, how to win the business deal, how to ace the interview. But also, what's your conversation with, I don't know, your wife and kids or your parents or, stakeholders, advisors, investors, right? You have to come from a place of core values. You can't just wing it. And if you do that, you're going to make sure that the wrong people are not in the picture. The right ones, you give your full attention, you give your full value, and then, you can have your ideal client profile, but among other categories. Then the last one, I think it's a capstone for the other 3. It's what's your conversation with God or the universe? And it's not anything evangelical. It's just, how do you deal with I'm nothing in the grand scheme of the universe, but I'm also a big deal because, I'm here at a certain time. I don't know, God put me here or whatever your framework is. What do I make of this? Or what's the meaning of life? What's my community? What are my rituals? Right? How do I make sense of that and contextualize who I am, where I am, and what am I supposed to do with this? And then the 4 conversations, you kind of go from the bottom of a mountain all the way up to the top. And once you're there, it's not kumbaya, I've understood everything is clear, but you know the path, what are the pieces that you need to check in with yourself every single day. And once you've more or less mastered that process of going up and down, you can focus on individual pieces like, my time management is a disaster because I had a kid a few months ago, right? And then once you have this sense of the process, you can bring others with you up the mountain. And that's what you can do as a manager, a leader, as a head of HR, whatever. That's how you can help people to really raise themselves up because they can master those parts of their life and they can bring their best self to work and be in that higher cognitive state to really help your company grow. There is no other choice. You have to take care of all those pieces.
Yeah, and so have you modularized that, and put that into online learning?
Yeah, so I'm creating a course actually as we speak. And I'm going to be doing lots of trainings and workshops. I've already done bits and pieces, but now it's sort of in one long continuum. And it's called Be Your Own Commander-in-Chief. And that's really what I feel is critical for our time because we can't look to institutions or leaders out there to lead us. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, it's so important. And so often we will go to a 3 to 5 day high potential leadership course and it'll say, here's all the things you need to do. And they'll literally say, and don't forget, exercise is something that you need, right? Or don't forget your work-life balance is something you need. It's like mentioned as a sentence in the 3 to 5 day, but it all works together, right? It's just crazy. So I'm very interested in that and following that, seeing how that does. So, and if you do need some help in, I don't know where you're at, but if you do need some help as far as executing some of those modules or visualize, I can certainly point you into some direction there too. So,
appreciate that.
But yeah, so we'll also, I guess, put a link to somewhere that people can find the book. So in the description, and look forward to seeing that. So I'm glad you brought that up. All things that I was unaware of. So
my pleasure. Thank you very much, David. It's great to speak with you.
Good speaking with you. All right, take care.
Take care.